That's right. It's the Dirt Bike Channel Podcast. This is your host, Kyle Brotherson. It's been too long. I keep saying that. But man, this has been a busy summer for me and a busy time. I think it's only getting more and more busy, and I'm just kind of worried that I got to figure something out. I got to figure out how to manage my time better or hire some things out or whatnot because it's getting busy. Today, though, we're going to have an awesome podcast. I actually want to talk about the first 10 hours on the 2020 Sherco 300 SEF factory. That's a bike that I've been riding here for the last little bit. I kind of cycle and I go through bikes, and I try not to ride. A lot of times I try not to ride the same bike back to back. Maybe I will if I'm on like a longer trip or something. But if I'm just here in Utah, I try to ride one bike one time and then the next bike the other time. Every once in a while, I'll ride the bike 2 or 3 times in a row, especially if it's shorter rides and I'm just trying to kind of get an idea of what's going on with it. And I've been riding the Sherco. I've ridden it several times. I've got 10 motor hours on the bike. And it's funny because in 10 motor hours, you really start to kind of get an idea of what a bike is like. I try to ride the bikes anywhere between, 15 to 100 hours before I do a full review on the bikes. And this is by no means a full review of this bike because I still have more testing to come, but I definitely have developed, I've developed a little bit of a relationship with the bike, and I kind of know what the bike is about now after 10 hours. And so I wanted to do this in podcast form and kind of tell you guys what I'm feeling on the bike, what I'm seeing on the bike, and then this video might make it out to YouTube as well, just to get a little bit, to give you guys a few other places to find this. Obviously, if you're just watching this on YouTube, you ought to subscribe to the Dirt Bike Channel Podcast. You can get this podcast wherever podcasts are, downloaded from whatever provider you get them from, whether it's Apple, Google, Stitcher, or anywhere in between. All the places that do podcasts, you should be able to find the Dirt Bike Channel Podcast and subscribe to that thing and tell your friends about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, or the first 10 hours on the Sherco 300 SEF factory. I kind of broke these down into just 3 different categories. I've got needs improvement so far that I've found. I've got some really good things about the bike, and then just some things that I noticed that are neither good or bad, but just some things that I've noticed on the bike as I've been, testing it. Also, see these blue light glasses right here? I'm going to put the blue light glasses on. I've been wearing these for the last month or so, and they just kind of help me so at the end of the day, my eyes don't hurt as bad. So these are there's no prescription on these things. Promotion company that I work with that I get a lot of my shirts and different things from, they sent me these things to see if I wanted to offer these for sale on my website. I don't know if I do, but I have been using them. And my kids think that I need glasses or something. But it just takes it filters the blue light out. And especially because I've got a big light here up above the monitor, this is just kind of nice so it doesn't strain my eyes. And I think it's helping. I think it's helping. So let's jump into the Sherco 2020 Sherco 300 SEF factory. This is a 4-stroke. Here are the things, and you guys are gonna hate me for this, at least some of the Sherco guys, but I'm gonna start out with the things that need improvement, and then we'll go to the good things, and then just the random things that I noticed. The first thing that's kind of on my mind, and this is in no particular order of if it's a problem or not, it's just something that I wrote down. The first thing that I think needs improvement is the air filter. The air filter on the Sherco is under the seat, and I'm not really a fan of air filters under the seat. The problem is that as you're kind of finagling the air filter down in there, it doesn't fit super well, and it could be very, very easy. You know how air filters have the little cage, the plastic cage that you put the foam filter around? It would be very, very easy if you're not extremely careful to tear the filter kind of off of that plastic cage as you're pushing it down through the frame and down in there to get it to fit to the actual airbox. It would be way easy to do that and get it installed wrong and then suck dirt in the motor. You guys might think that's nitpicking, but it really isn't, because you've got to have a clean air filter in the bike. And even more important than a clean air filter is a well-fitted air filter, okay? And this is a problem I see with this bike. I don't think it's a good idea to have the air filter under the seat. It's too hard to get it in there. They need to do something more accessible. Yamaha has it up on the top of the tank. KTM has it on the side. A lot of the bikes like KTM and Beta and Husky have the bike on the side. So yes, it is technically a toolless air filter because you don't even have to have a tool to take the seat off the Sherco, which is cool. But it kind of screws in there with this long little knurled screw, and it's kind of hard to get that thing to thread. I've done it several times and I thought I would get better at it, and if you're just a kid, if you give this bike to your kid or whatever, dude, they might not be able to get that thing in there properly. And I think that's something that needs improvement. So the air filter location, not super great. Easy to install it wrong and suck dirt out, okay? Next thing I've noticed, it's the oil filler cap. So I have the Sherco factory. The factory has a Akrapovic exhaust, and that's really, really cool. But your oil filler cap is located directly under the header pipe on this bike, like directly under it. I posted some pictures of this on Facebook and Instagram, and of course, and I basically said, "Dear Sherco, while it's a good idea to have, an oil screens on your oil plugs and a magnetic oil plug so it kind of picks up the metal shavings in the oil, those are good ideas. It's not a good idea to put the oil filler cap directly under the header pipe, and there's very, very little clearance, and it's really hard to actually take that off and without kind of burning yourself. Anyone who knows anything about changing oil, you know that you need to change the oil when the oil is warm, preferably if the motor's hot. You can let it cool down a little bit, and that's fine. But the header pipe gets hot almost instantaneously on these 4-strokes. The header pipe is hot enough to burn the crap out of you within 10 seconds of the bike being on. And because it's not a 2-stroke, it holds the heat there. And so that stays hot for a long time. So yeah, you can heat up the bike and everything and then, wait for 10 minutes and let that cool off. And then it maybe won't burn you. But as soon as you go to check the actual oil, when you go to put oil, and then it's hard to get the oil in there because the oil filler cap is directly over that. So you need a special funnel or something. And it's just this was not thought out properly. It's directly under the header pipe. And then, okay, so you put however much oil you think is going to be the right amount of oil, and it has a sight window, a sight glass on this bike. So then I put some oil in there. I wasn't 100% sure how much oil I needed to put in. I looked at the manual, but this time I wasn't doing oil filter change because I had done an oil filter change before. And so if you're not going to change the oil filter, which I don't change the oil filters every time, that oil looked so pristine when it came out. And so once I saw how clean the oil looked, I'm like, I'm going to skip the oil filter change this time. And so I didn't know exactly how much oil to put in there. And then, so you start the bike and you let it run for, 10, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and then you kill the bike to actually see where the oil is in the sight glass. And at that point, your header pipe is hotter than Hades again, and so you're kind of, if you waited 20 minutes in between each time, then you wouldn't get burned. But the point is, we just need the header pipe or, this location of the oil filter to be in a slightly different place so that it's not direct. It's not a good design. So anyway, oil filter is right under the hot exhaust. That's a problem. Another kind of interesting thing, and this is just maybe nitpicking, but you have to remove the skid plate in order to change the oil because it has 2 oil plugs that come directly out of the bottom of the motor. And that's good because they drain. It's good to have them drain really nice, but you do have to take the skid plate off every time because on some of the other bikes like Betas and KTMs and just random ones, not everyone does this, but they'll kind of have the oil plug on the bottom of the case but coming out the side. And so then you can kind of drain your oil out without taking your skid plate off. On this bike, I mean, technically you could drill holes in your skid plate that go directly up in there. And if I was keeping this bike, that's probably what I would do. That way I don't have to take the skid plate off every time I change the oil, but just something to note. One other thing that I don't love, and that is that the battery is down below the airbox. Now, the benefit of that is that, it's basically right down below the air filter. The benefit of this is it kind of keeps the center of gravity on the bike pretty low. and so that's a good thing. The problem is that the battery gets trashed with dirt and oil, because any of the oil that is like residual oil that's a little bit too much oil that is on your air filter, it then drops straight down onto the battery, and then you've got oil there, and then it just attracts all this dirt. So the top of your battery looks like a war zone, and really hard to get in there and clean that, especially clean that without dumping dirt down in your airbox. And let's just say that you had to jump the bike for some reason. Like some crazy thing happened, you ran your battery dead and you had to jump the bike. Well, you'd have to put those leads way down in there, and you could never do this with having the air filter on. You cannot access the battery without taking off your air filter. I just think there's not a lot of foresight into that thing, and so I think that it's a kind of a terrible place for the battery to be, just because you can't get to it until you take the air filter off. And if you were ever going to jump the bike, how much do you want to jump the bike while you're putting like jumper cable leads? And can you even get your jumper cable leads down in there that far? Depends on how big your jumper cable, terminals are, I guess, because it's kind of tucked way down in there. And I don't think that is a good spot to have it. Something else, the way that Sherco has the radiators designed is very, very easy to bend the radiators. So, and I know this because of the dealer who sold it to me and other people who reached out to me, and they said, look, you cannot ride this bike at all without putting radiator guards on. Otherwise, you'll bend them, because you set the bike over on its side and you're going to bend the radiator. So I had to install radiator guards right away. Now, I know a lot of people do this on all their bikes, but I do have certain bikes now that I haven't felt like I really needed to install any radiator guards on, because we weren't bending radiators, or even if we were only barely bending them. But that's something that happens. These radiators are easy to bend, so then I put a Bulletproof Designs radiator guards on there just immediately. Something else is the rear brake sticks out too far. If you look at a Sherco and you look down, especially if you're sitting on the bike and you just look down and you see how far the brake is out from the side of the clutch case, it's kind of staggering how far it sticks out. It sticks out a long ways. And what happens is it can be really easy to bend that thing. Now, I've been really, really careful with the bike. It's not one of my, quote, soft enduro bikes. I've just been taking it in places where I wasn't going to get into a lot of trouble, because I don't like doing hard enduro / soft enduro on 4-strokes. I just don't. It's not the right tool for the job. So I've been careful with it. But if I rode this bike like I ride my 2-strokes, that thing would bend off. It would just get trashed. So there's got to be a way to get that rear brake closer into the bike, closer into that clutch cover. That's one. Oh, where I really, really notice it a lot is when I sit down and go to, like, let's say I'm standing up on the bike and then I have kind of a tight corner or something, and I sit down on the bike. What happens is, boom, I just hit my toe just hits that rear brake like immediately, because it sticks out so far. It's sticking out further than it is on other bikes. And so it makes it so I just grab the rear brake inadvertently, and I've stalled the bike multiple times because of that. I just sit down on the bike and boom, stall it. So you're going to have to adjust your riding position a little bit, or find some way to bend that brake lever in. I don't know if there's aftermarket options for that. I did hear that this is something that Cody Webb, Sherco, factory Sherco off-road rider, was kind of working on and didn't love. So that's something. I don't love the stock foot pegs. The stock foot pegs come out completely flat on the Sherco. And this is more of like, I don't know, like even a trials thing. On all of the other off-road dirt bikes that I've had over the last 10 years, minus maybe the other Shercos, they've all had an upward camber to the foot pegs, so they come out of the frame, and then the tips of the foot pegs are up, raised a few degrees. This helps to lock you in on the bike, and it helps to make it so that you don't have to kind of hold with your core quite so hard and just like squeeze the bike so hard, because the way the foot pegs are, it kind of locks you in on the bike. Everyone else is doing this. KTM, Honda, Beta, Yamaha, Husqvarna, all the other bikes have an upward camber to the pegs. The Sherco is a flat camber, and that just makes it so you have to squeeze a little bit harder. Now, that's not a huge thing. It's just something that I don't like. And so I've installed some Fastway foot pegs that kind of have an upward, where I can adjust the upward camber to them. And so I've done that. The grips on the Shercos, I've had three different Shercos now. And the grips that they put on the Sherco, it says Sherco, they look cool, but they're so freaking hard. The compound is so freaking hard. And I ride a fair amount. I'm riding once a week, sometimes 1.5 times a week. The first time I rode the Sherco, I got blisters on my thumb here. You know how you have, they have like products for this. They have those kind of like foam rubber donut things that you put on the end of you put on your grip and slide it all the way over so that you don't get like a blister right here on your thumb, kind of that first knuckle on your thumb. Well, I don't really ever get blisters there, but the first time I rode the Sherco, boom. And I'd been riding all these other bikes, so it wasn't like I wasn't in shape, but I got blisters on both thumbs right there the first time with those grips, and I'm going, what gives, man? And so I had to cut those off after the first ride. And then here's something that I've been hesitant to share, but and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about that I'm like, I don't know what is going on here, but I don't love. So I ride dirt bikes now, and I ride, once a week. Last week I was actually up on a trip in Idaho, and I rode 4 days in a row. 4 days in a row. We did about 200 miles of single track. Most of the days were pretty long. I mean, they were long days on the bike because we were doing some filming. I hired a film guy to come and help us. At Generical, if you check him out on Instagram, at Generical, hired Chris to come out and do some filming for us on this Idaho trip, and we were out for 4 days. And I was riding two of my KTMs, 250XC and 300 XCW. I rode for 4 days, and I wasn't sore. I wasn't even sore a little bit after that 4-day ride. Here's the weird thing. Every single time that I've ridden the Sherco 300 SEF factory, I am really sore 2 days after. Let me say that again. Every time I've ridden it, I've been sore. I don't really get sore after dirt bike rides anymore. It doesn't matter whether I'm riding the Beta, doesn't matter whether I'm riding a Yamaha, KTM, whatever, Honda. I've ridden Kawasaki's. I don't really get sore. That was a thing that used to happen to me 5, 6, 7 years ago. I would get sore after like a grueling ride or something, but I don't really get sore now after these rides. And I've just started to notice it because even the last time I rode the bike, it wasn't that grueling of a ride. I was up at Willow Creek, if any of you guys here in Utah know where that is, and I was riding with Tyler and Gary and some different guys, Tyler's brothers, Spencer and Jason, and the next day and the day after that, I was a little bit sore. My back was sore, my hamstrings were sore, and I'm going, what did I do? And then I went, wait, I rode the Sherco. The time before that, I was riding up American Fork Canyon here in Utah. I was just alone. Didn't do a really long ride. And 2 days later, because I'm that guy, I'm the 48-hour guy. 48 hours after, I'm sore. There was a time I rode the bike over at Stansbury Front, for those of you in Utah, and I was just alone. I was playing around and testing with a new drone that I got, and I rode the bike for, 40, 50 miles, and I got so sore. My hamstrings and lower back were so sore after that ride because I pushed it really hard for a while. I couldn't even hardly walk with my wife. I went on a date with my wife the day after, and we were just going to go walking for a little bit. We went to dinner and we were going to go walking, and I had to cut our walk short because it hurt so bad. Like my hamstrings were so freaking tight. I don't know what it is. I've moved the handlebars. I know the handlebars are a little bit lower. The bars have a little bit lower bend to them, but I've moved them forward. I've kind of rotated them forward. I have changed the position of the foot pegs. I'm actually now, I changed the foot pegs. I'm actually now going to drop the foot pegs down and back because I have the ability to do that with the Fastway foot pegs. I don't know what it is, guys. And I'm not saying this is going to be for everybody, and I'm not even saying the bike is really fun. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But for whatever reason, this bike makes me sore when I ride it. And I bought this bike, and this is going to be a sweepstakes bike. So this is the thing. I'm totally frank and honest with you guys. I just am telling you, it makes me sore. It makes me more sore than these other bikes. Because you would assume, well, Kyle, then maybe you're just out of riding shape or whatever. Because if you ride the bike and you're a little bit sore, and I know there's probably going to be a lot of guys out there that are saying, hey, Kyle, I'm always so sore after I ride the bike. I'm telling you, I'm not. I'm not sore. There was one time that I couldn't hardly even walk. That happened. I rode the bike on a Tuesday. And then Wednesday, I could barely even walk. And then Thursday, I had another ride scheduled. And I was terrified that I wasn't going to be able to ride. And I went out and I rode my KTM 250XC that day. So on Tuesday, I rode the Sherco, got completely like my back and my hamstrings were super tight. Thursday, I've got this ride. I can barely even walk. I'm just like, oh, this is going to be crazy. I get on my 250XC, boom, go out on the ride, and I'm able to just rip. I didn't feel any like weirdness in my legs. And then I did far more work on the bike on Thursday on the KTM than I had done on Tuesday on the Sherco, and I was just blitzing it, and I felt so great on the KTM. And then I get off the bike and I'm like struggling to even load the thing because I'm still tight in my hamstring. So it's just something that I'm going to continue to play with, but every time I've ridden, I've been more sore than the other bikes. And this isn't a KTM versus Sherco thing. This is Beta. This is Yamaha. This is KTM. This is Honda. This is every bike that I get on. This bike, for whatever reason, is making me sore. I don't know why. Let's go into the good things, because there are a lot of good things on this bike. The first thing that I just want to mention, this is a random thing, but I love how the skid plate, it's actually an AXP made skid plate. It doesn't cover the linkage, so that's not great. But your skid plate on this bike is going to be able to bolt to the frame in the front and rear. I wish everybody did this. KTM, why do you not have it so your skid plates can't bolt to the frame? I know on some bikes they do bolt to them, but some of the Betas will bolt to the frame. This Sherco actually bolts to the frame with the skid plate, and I think that is awesome in front and rear. Great, great, great. Here's another thing that's great about the bike. The forks are great. It's a KYB fork, and it's valved really, really good. So, not all valving is the same, but this KYB fork, and yes, this is a factory race edition. All you guys out there that are like, Kyle, you're not riding fast enough. No, this fork is actually really good. Really, really good. Really, really good. I actually just have kind of turned my clickers all the way out on this thing, and as far as on the compression. So I've sped up the fork as fast as I can, and it soaks up the stuff really, really nice. Whether I'm going in a little bit faster stuff or slower, more choppy stuff, the fork is really, really good, and it's a solid platform. I think a lot of the guys are in the weight range, which is kind of where I am, 150 to 170. This bike is going to be money for you guys, and I do really, really love that front fork. Here's another thing that is pretty cool, and I'll get to another thing on the forks later. Here's another thing that's pretty cool. So the motor, I'm going to say the motor is awesome. The motor doesn't blow you away. In fact, I just rode a 2020 YZ250FX last week or the week before. I got to ride the Sherco and the YZ250FX back to back. The YZ250FX is a lot snappier. It's just like a really hard-hitting, snappy, just like in-your-face motor, and I love that. The Sherco is more of a mellow thing. It's more of a mid-range, torquey motor, and it doesn't blow your socks off. But what it does do is it does do single track really, really well. It just gets traction, and it just has like this, like a mild demeanor. And don't take that the wrong way. It's just got it's a really cool mix where this thing actually can just chug along, and it's really, really cool. But you can't just if you get on all of a sudden, you might think, well, this thing is underpowered in the first like little minute, because it doesn't like snap you really fast. But it does make you just go, and it's smooth, super torquey. And so, like, if I compare this to that YZ250FX, if I'm going to go ride out in the desert, I do love the way the power comes on the Yamaha better than on the Sherco. But if I'm going to ride, mountain single track, or just kind of a little bit more gnarly terrain, a little bit more technical terrain, I take the Sherco for sure, because that power is just a little bit more manageable. There's more of it down in the low end, and it's just more forgiving, and just allows you to kind of do some of the things where you'd be stalling. In my opinion, you stall out the Yamaha 250FX. And so the motor, it's a really kind of cool little mix. I wish more four strokes had a 300cc option for us, because it's a super sweet displacement. I think it's kind of a, It's something that I wish the other manufacturers would do. So another thing that's really good about this bike, on the factory, I'm not 100% sure on just the standard like race version, but the factory version comes with the Akrapovic exhaust, and it's actually spark arrested. And they give you 2 different spark arresters with the kit. One's maybe a little bit snappier than the other. I tried them both. I couldn't really tell the difference. I've got kind of the more high performance snappy one in there, and it's hard to tell. But it is really cool to have a bike like this that is spark arrested right from the get-go. I think maybe the only other bike that I had like that might have been the Beta 390 RR Race Edition. It might have been spark arrested. Somebody told me it was, but I couldn't remember. But it's really nice to have a spark arrested exhaust on your bike that you don't have to just go around and turn over and get something else, especially where it's the Akrapovic exhaust. It would be really stupid if you got this Akrapovic that's supposed to be in this upgraded, muffler, and then suddenly you have to go off and, get it spark arrested. That would be really annoying. Here's another thing that's really good about the bike. Radiator fan. So on the factory edition, it comes with a radiator fan installed from the factory. Now, I don't know exactly when it decides to come on, and I don't believe that you can program this to like come on at a earlier time or a later time, but it does have a radiator fan, and the fan is coming on all the time, and that's a really, really good thing. I think more bikes, especially the 4-strokes, should have radiator fans on them from the factory. And yes, I also think that the quote hard enduro bikes, like maybe like a KTM XCW bike, it should come with a radiator fan. It probably should, but they're always looking to bring cost down and bring weight down. But I'm glad that Sherco has that on their factory model. Excuse me. Another thing about the bike that is really, really good. The bike turns super quick. It is super quick. It probably is the fastest turning and like quickest just kind of changing direction thing of any 4-stroke that I've ever been on. And that's really, really cool. In fact, if you're just going to ride, like mountain single track and stuff, and you have to be on a 4-stroke, this bike is going to be really hard to beat, because although it actually weighs a little bit more than these other models, it feels really light and it turns really quick. Very, very quick. You kind of forget almost that you're on a 4-stroke because of the way this thing turns, and it's just so agile and so nimble. And again, it feels super light. So then here's some of the things so that kind of wraps up the things that are good. Here's some of the things that I've noticed, and I wanted to tie it in right now. The bike actually feels so light that if you ride it in its stock fork height, that's the height above the triple clamps where these forks are placed, it feels a little bit twitchy. And especially when the speeds get a little bit higher. And this is something that I noticed on the 2017 version of this bike, the 304-stroke that I did in 2017. It just kind of felt a little bit twitchy, a little bit unstable. So the thing with this is, okay, where are you going to ride this? If you're going to be riding it out in the desert, or you're going to be in like 3rd gear, 4th gear terrain, you'll probably want to move the forks down in the triple clamps just a little bit. If you're just doing like slow, more technical stuff in the woods where you want to change direction really fast, then you could leave the forks right where they are when you get it, and the bike is going to feel really, really agile and really, really nimble. For me, I needed the bike. I felt like I wanted to have the bike a little bit more stable. And so I dropped my forks down 3 millimeters in the triple clamps, and that made the kind of the changes that I was looking for. It's just a little bit more stable. It doesn't feel quite as light now, I'll be honest, because it's amazing what this will do if you just drop your forks just a little bit, or you raise your forks. If you raise your forks up in the clamps, it makes the bike it shortens the overall wheelbase. It makes the bike feel more twitchy, a little bit less stable, but faster to turn, easier to lay over into a corner. And the opposite happens when you drop the bike down. You're lengthening the wheelbase, and the bike becomes more stable, but it's not quite as quick to turn in those things. So I did drop the bike down just 3 millimeters in the triple clamps, or the forks 3 millimeters in the triple clamps, and that gave me kind of the thing that I was looking for. Just one last thing that I noticed. In the beginning, I thought the bike didn't start very well, because it is slow to start especially when it's hot, and because it doesn't have a backup Kickstarter, I'm like, this could be a major problem. But as I rode it more and more, what I realized is that you actually can give and should crack your throttle open just a little bit, and that makes the bike fire just a touch faster. In some cases, a lot faster. There was one time, and the reason why this is so interesting to me is because all of the other, fuel injected bikes I've had, especially the 4-strokes in the last many years, if you give throttle on the bike when you're trying to crank it, the bike will not start. I know this is how it was with my Beta 390 race edition last year. You could not touch the throttle. In fact, that was something that the dealers told me, and even Tim Pilge told me, the president of Beta USA. He's like, make sure you take your hand all the way off the throttle because the bike will not start if you have the throttle open. And this also happened with my 2020 Yamaha YZ250 FX. It would not start if you cracked the throttle, especially if you cracked it very much. Like sometimes you could crack the throttle on the YZ just a teeny bit and it would start. But if you gave really any, quote, gas, you're not giving gas, you're just opening the throttle. If you gave it any gas, open the throttle very far on the Yamaha, there was no way the bike was ever going to start. You'd run the battery dead before the bike started. This bike, the Sherco, is just the opposite. If you want to make it start quicker, especially once it's warm, open the throttle a little bit, crack the throttle open, and then suddenly the bike fires to life. There was one time that I cranked on the bike for 5 to 10 seconds. And this is when I had I'm just fingers off the throttle and I just boom, hit the thumb switch there. And it wasn't going to start. I'm like, this thing is going to go dead before it starts. And then on the next ride, I just started to crack the throttle open and boom, it's starting a lot better. Something else that I've noticed is that the clutch pull on the bike, and I'm just going to make a note of this because it just popped into my head. I've got to put this down in my notes. The clutch pull is heavier on this bike. It's heavier than on the other bikes that I'm currently testing it against right now. And it's weird because it has a Brembo clutch cylinder, master cylinder up there on your left hand. And it appears to be the same even model as the KTM. It's like the Brembo number 10. But it's either it's valved differently inside, it's got a different piston or something inside there, the master cylinder, or they just have stiffer springs inside the motor. And I've noticed this on the 2-stroke too. The 2-stroke version of the Sherco, it's just a little bit heavier of a clutch pull. So it's something to note, something to put in the back of your head because it is just a little harder to pull the clutch. That isn't a super big issue, but it becomes a more of a compounding issue throughout the day as you ride the bike. It just, can fatigue your hand a little bit more, especially if you're doing some of the nastier riding, some of that hard enduro or soft enduro type stuff. It's just something that you're going to have to deal with. So, I mean, those are my thoughts on the first, 10 hours of riding the Sherco. I have had a really good time on the bike. But the biggest thing is I'm wondering why I'm a little bit more sore when I ride that thing. Why is my lower back sore? Why are my hamstrings sore after riding the bike? And I thought it would go away after I changed the foot pegs, but it hasn't. So there's something about my body position on this bike. And if it was just like, oh, I just have two different bikes, and you could say, well, Kyle, you're more used to the KTM, but I don't get sore on the Yamahas. I don't get sore on the Betas. I don't get sore on the Huskies. I haven't gotten sore on the Hondas that I've ridden. I'm going to be hopefully getting a new Kawasaki here in the next little bit. The Kawasaki KX250X. We'll see about that, but I'm riding a lot of different bikes. And this one makes me sore. I don't remember the other Shercos getting me sore. So if everything goes right, maybe I'll get a 2021 Sherco 300 2-stroke next year and kind of check and see what they've done with their counterbalancing. And we'll see. Is it just this bike, or is it what's happening with the Shercos? And I'm got to admit some of the fault. It's got to be some of the body position. It's got to be some of me. But I'm trying to ride this bike the same as I'm riding these other ones, and it just goes to show you that every one of these bikes are an individual. Little nuances on the bikes can make a big difference. So I would like to hear from you guys. If there's more of you out there that have these Sherco 300 SEF factories, send me an email, kyle@dirtbikechannel.com. Tell me if you've noticed anything like this, because it's kind of weird. And if you watch this on YouTube, put it down in the comments. Let me know if you have any low back pains or hamstring pains or anything when you get off of your Sherco, because I'd just like to see. The best way to get a hold of me is to email me, kyle@dirtbikechannel.com. If you have topic suggestions for these podcasts, go ahead and email those to me. And yeah, keep in mind, we've got a sweepstakes coming up. The Sherco, it's starting October 15th until December 15th. The Sherco will be one of the sweepstakes bikes. I'm going to give this bike away. I'm going to give the KTM 300XCW TPI and the 250XC TPI. All three of those bikes are going away this year. So this fall, this winter, whatever. That's what I've got for you guys. Until next time, let's leave a single track. Thanks.